Hi, I'm Erin Marcus, former corporate executive turned entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Conquer Your Business. Welcome to the Ready Yet podcast. We're excited to bring you more than 100 episodes of interviews and insights designed to help entrepreneurs get the financial and emotional freedom they need in order to build a business and a life they're proud of. All right. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Ready Yet podcast, where my guest this morning, Michael Levitt, and I will be chatting about burnout, amongst other things. I have some questions about that. So this is really good timing for me personally. Whether other people, I'm sure they'll benefit from it as well. But before we get into all my questions, why don't you tell people a little bit officially who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you so much. Really looking forward to our conversation today. So, as you said, my name is Michael Levitt. That was given to me by my parents. So it's a name that I've stuck with for a while, and no real plan. Yeah, it's I hear the name and I go, oh, okay, that I think they're talking about me. So I fell into this world of coaching and speaking and writing about burnout through my own journey with burnout back in 2009 and 2010, where I had a pretty bad bout of it, and it created what I like to call my year of worst case scenarios. So over a year's time, from 2009 to 2010, I had a heart attack that should have killed me. I lost my job during the Great Recession. My car was repossessed and my home was foreclosed. And all of those things happened to me because I was burned out. I wasn't taking care of myself. So after, dusting myself off of those fun events, I thought, well, I don't want to go through that again. So let's kind of figure out what in the world happened. Why did I end up the way that I did? And I started researching, like, okay, so what's this burnout stuff? And I realized, oh, yeah, I check all the boxes on that. Okay. And then, recovering from that, I decided, all right, let's do a little bit deeper dive into this and figure out why I burnt out. What was I doing that created these things to happen? So after doing that for a couple of years, I'm like, okay, now I know how to kind of live my life without doing that again, and was, on my merry way. And then I just started noticing a lot more people burning out. And this was, 2014, 2015. Now it's, even much worse than it was back then. And I thought, okay, I can do something about this. Let me start writing about it. So I started writing about it, had a blog, and then a colleague of mine said, you should do a podcast on this. And I'm like, I don't podcast. Why the heck would I do that? And he said, no, just, do little 5 minute, little 5 minute segments on different things you can do to avoid burnout or recover from it. I'm like, okay, fine. So I did that, started with like 50 or so episodes, and then he calls me and says, so when are you gonna start interviewing people? Like, it's like, what are you doing to me, man?
Other people about this?
I gotta talk to other people, and not just about burnout. Talk to them about anything. And it's like, okay. So did that, and 600 some episodes later, here we are. And like, yikes, okay. And then I decided, okay, since I'm writing, I might as well publish some books about it too. And it just kind of took a life of its own. The framework, I launched the business, I got incorporated and all that. It's like, well, you know what, why don't I just do that and kind of get something and see what happens. And, ended up leaving my job in 2018 to go full time into this and consulting and all kinds of other stuff. So it was one of those things where my experience actually birthed a career path for me, which I would have never guessed, after, that wonderful year that I had, that would have happened. I figured I would just, gone back into working, learning, better ways to work without beating myself up. And that's how we got here today. So again, looking forward to this chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So one of the things that strikes me about your story, and I've interviewed other people who've had situations like yours, where when you're saying burnout, you're talking about some heavy duty things happening, right? Like debilitating life and death situations. And then there's a lot of people that it's almost becoming a little bit overused, the word, right? Like there's, right, the word burnout in our dramatic Instagram world, we're calling things burnout that are definitely a rough patch, don't get me wrong, but isn't anywhere near the level of the story that you share, the stories that I've had some guests share, collapsing on the floor type of, hospitalized situations.
Mhm.
And I vacillate between thinking overusing the word waters down the problem, or does awareness help people jump out in front of this before it actually gets bad?
I think and this is just my observation and participating in studies and research and whatnot, is it is good that we're talking about it, but I don't think society is quite yet at the stage of people actually taking some actions to correct it. There was an article that was published yesterday that I have not read in detail, but it was a UK based article, but it basically flushed out that employee mental health programs through work are not getting used. They're not helping at all.
Yeah.
Even though employers are pouring more money into it now than before, just here's the
But I
EAP
think
brochure.
there's a right, but when I listen to what happens in the corporate world, and my boyfriend works for a very large company. It's actually a really good company, but because we're all working from home, he seems to move slowly out of his office and into the kitchen over the course of the day. So I hear more and more of it. I hear all of his afternoon meetings. And this great company is also having this problem.
Mhm.
And it's so weird. Like, the more that I get involved with people like yourself, and the more that I get immersed in my own personal development journey, I'm thinking this problem is being solved because the people I surround myself with are very aware of this, and they've done the work to prevent it, and they're in charge of their own lives. And yeah, I agree with you on the corporate side, even though there's so many rules now, and DEI and things that you need to be providing your employees. I think it's a check the box situation too many
Yeah,
times, right?
yeah.
The company says, look, I have this available to you. Check, I get to check the box.
Mhm.
But is it really something they promote to be utilized? Is it really something that they'd be okay with if people utilized it? And so I think it's so interesting to me that as a group of people has become more and more and more aware of it, the rest of the people, it's gotten worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, I think there's awareness, and going back to what you said a moment ago with the social media, Instagram, everybody's saying that they're burned out. They're definitely dealing with some stress, but
Mhm.
burnout is prolonged stress, where you're unable to keep up with the demands of your life. You're overwhelmed. Typically, it's work related, but you can get burnout from being a caregiver or
Oh yeah,
being a
absolutely.
stay at home parent or whatever the case may be. It's not exclusive to work, but the stats are showing that a lot of it is due to that, and there's a lot of factors that are thrown in there. One, and we're starting to see this again. It's kind of mimicking, when I had my burnout during the Great Recession, where organizations are cutting back. So that if you're fortunate enough to not lose your job, you're going to, in all likelihood, have to pick up the slack a little bit because you have less people working, so you're going to be working more on some things. So that can be emotionally overwhelming. You're like, oh, I got more work to do. And a lot of it, and some people might get mad at me for saying this, a lot of it is your mindset. It's like, okay, I have to do this versus I get to
Right.
do this. I'm paid to be here 8 hours. I've got all this work. It's going to take me at least 8 hours to do it, or I'm never going to get my work done. Never getting your work done means, you're always got things going on, is actually a good thing for job security.
Well, and this is something that I had to learn when you talk about your perspective. I had to stop telling myself that I needed to fix my calendar, that I needed to fix my time blocks, that I needed to
Mhm.
fix my mindset. I have I figured out somewhere, and I'm sure other external people helped me realize it, that saying that I had to fix those things implied that there was one day that there was going to be fine. And that's not a thing. Like calendar management is an ongoing thing. Mindset management is an ongoing thing. And letting go of the idea that it's either broken and or fixed kind of helped me change my perspective.
Mhm.
Sometimes I have to work on it more, and sometimes I could get to work on it less, but I got to be aware of it. And the other thing, to your point, where because people are, they're getting people are getting laid off, the people who remain have more work to do. I would say compounded right now is the fact that the increase in price, right? The inflation and the effect that price increases have had on just staying generally alive and okay have
Mhm.
gone up so much
Yeah.
that now you have that added stress of doing more work for what result?
Yeah, the cost of things are much higher than what the government is reporting in certain things. Yes, okay, you can do the math and say, okay, yeah, that's up 20% or 5%, whatever on things. But you recognize it in the grocery store. We definitely recognized it at the gas station for a while. So when people started getting called back to go into the office, a lot of people are going, I
Why would
can't.
I spend half of my money that I'm making to get to your company to work for you?
Pretty much. And management's argument, well, the team dynamics and this, like, wait a minute. We've been working remotely for a year and a half, 2 years, even longer, and our productivity levels did not drop off. In many instances, we've seen that they were at least the same, if not increased, because what it did is it forced organizations to bust down all the silos that we had built
Mhm.
up over the years and let's get some communication flowing to make sure
Got to
everybody
do
has
it
everything they need.
differently, right?
Yeah,
You just
and
got to
and
figure
yeah.
out how to do it differently. And I heard a statistic. I mean, and I know it's not, you can say it's a problem, it's an inflation problem, not a burnout problem, but it all goes together.
Mhm,
You would need the way that the average wages are now, you would need, and the way the average home prices have increased, you would need the average employee would need a 47% raise
mhm.
in order to afford a house.
Yeah. Yeah, the
And
housing
that's
prices are
insanity.
just it's stupid, and it's not just in big markets either. It's in small towns. And it's getting to the point where, okay, we need to have some type of correction, adjustment, whatever you want to call it, but what will that look like? It's going to be painful no matter what.
It's going to be
And
painful, right?
and I remember, this is a long time ago. I remember in college I was taking an econ class, and this was, all right, I'll date myself. It was the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, me too.
And
Me too.
my
I was in
my
econ in 89. So,
yeah, so, yeah, 87, 88, so really close. So, I remember the econ teacher, was talking and giving us all the Keynesian stuff and, all the things, but, she made a comment, and it stuck with me, all these years later. It's like, at some point in our lifetime, we're probably going to see a pretty significant adjustment, and it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt really, really bad. And they asked, "Is it gonna be worse than the Great Depression kind of thing?" And she wouldn't comment on that. She said, I don't know what things will be like when it happens, but it's gonna get to the point where people simply cannot afford the cost of things. And it's like, what do we do about that? Do we, just move on, and like a lot of the commentary, it's like we'll own nothing and be happy about it. We're just going to be, paying subscription fees to everything from Netflix to our cars to food service or
but
whatever.
also to the houses, because I just
Yeah.
met a gentleman who he manages an investment fund, and nice guy, great guy, like he
Mhm,
manages an investment fund, and there it's a very secure, conservative, safe fund, because their entire portfolio is in multifamily housing.
mhm,
And so you have groups of investors being able to acquire houses and multifamily housing because we are moving towards, we'll only be able to ever rent,
mhm.
right? And what is that going to look like? And you can talk about the American dream and that's a bad thing, or you can just say this is the change and this is what we have to deal with. But it's very hard to unring a bell, right? it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. It's one of the things when I hear, and it's completely unrelated, but kind of funny, is whenever I hear, the phrase American Dream, I think of the late wrestler Dusty Rhodes. That was his nickname, was the American Dream.
Right, right, right. I remember.
Unfortunately, he's passed away, and unfortunately, the American Dream as it was, I think, may be out of reach for a lot of people for the foreseeable future.
And
And
it's
again,
changed. What they want has changed, right? The
of
American
course.
dream from the 50s was getting a job that led you stuck with that company and they stuck with you until you retired at 62.
Hmm.
And then you sat on your porch
Yeah.
in God's
Um,
waiting room,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, pretty much. I'm doing the rocking for those that are listening to the audio. I'm just rocking, going, this is boring.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. That's not what people want now.
no, and again, going back to something I kind of mentioned earlier, is when one of the things that leads to burnout and stress and all of that is stressing out over things that we don't have control over.
I was thinking the same thing.
I can't control the housing price individually. As a group, we could, but if you follow supply and demand, and this is probably the most I've ever talked about econ.
1989,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. But supply and demand, if the demand is there, it's going to justify that the cost is going to be this much a square foot or whatever. There's definitely an imbalance because you have areas that want people to come in and work, big cities and all of that, and they're like, but we can't afford to live there. So then you go, well, how do you get people to go into work, and then they live in a different area, so they've got longer commutes. Public transit, not a strong suit of our country. In certain areas, maybe a little bit better than others. New York, Boston,
Right,
okay.
Chicago. We're okay,
Chicago,
pretty
yeah,
okay.
Chicago, yeah. I took Metro. I was on the loop. When I lived there, and so yeah. But other parts, Detroit, where I'm originally from, oh no, that is, using a German phrase, das ist verboten. That you're not going to get public transit in Detroit because that cuts into their meal plan, which is the auto sector. And I understand that, but it people can't even afford cars. So it's like, okay, how do I, get a job? I don't have a car. I can't. There's an Alice Cooper song that touches that. I can't get a job because I don't have a car. I don't have a car because I can't get a job. And it's an older song, but it's true. So a lot of people are struggling and really upset about it and stressful. But again, there's certain things they can control and there's certain things that they
Yeah,
can't. And the sooner you get closer to understanding what you can control and finding the things that make you happy, which is comes from within, spoiler alert, figure out how to make yourself happy from within, then it helps minimize the stress a little bit. And if you don't have prolonged stress, you won't burn out. So a lot of the work is internal. We try to outsource everything. We want everything quick. We want to order something, have it delivered to us, and not wait 10 minutes, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We want things to be quick. And certain things in life just don't work that way. So it frustrates us because we're so instantly gratified with the way things are. When we don't get it, it frustrates us. We're like, why isn't this working? It's because it's not supposed to work that
it's
way.
not supposed. Well, and one of the things you said that I totally agree with you. Like the stress is caused by focusing on things we can't control,
Mhm.
and we feel that we can't control. And yet, I've had. It's weird how these happen in chunks. I've had so many conversations in just the last couple of weeks. Maybe they knew I would be talking to you today, where the thing that somebody wants to control is another person,
Mhm. Yeah.
is another person. And as soon as that happens, you're out of luck. Like you can control whether or not you go keep that job. You can control whether or not you live here or there. There's sacrifices to be made, there's adjustments to be made, there's choices and decisions to be made and actions to be taken. But as soon as you want one of the things you get to control, to be another human being, you're doomed. Like that's
Yeah.
just not a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, you can't do that. And I've worked, for bosses and they've been great. And I've had some that were frustrating, but a lesson that I learned much later in life, which I wish I would have learned earlier, but at least I learned it, was you have to understand things from their point of view. And I think that would help in all kinds of aspects of life. Seek to understand what their point of view is on things instead of just this black and white Trump versus Biden. It's like seek to understand the other person's point of view, why they feel this way on a particular matter. Yeah, not saying it's going to change your mind, but it just like, if you have your own personal beliefs and thoughts and how you feel things should be, got to be careful about should. You don't want to should all over yourself, but how you perceive things could be. Again, that's one of those things where is that in your control or not? And when it
And
comes to
and
your
honestly,
employer,
should it be? Like I'm always
yeah.
I think that's a big one for me that
Mm,
I don't know if this was work that I've done on my personal journey or my natural leave me alone personality. I don't know where this comes from, but I really have never understood why anyone cares what anyone else is doing.
yeah.
I just never like as long as we're not we're not murdering people, we're not stealing from people.
Hmm.
Why does I never understood that? And I see that being the cause of so much stress
Hmm. Oh yeah, you see it
because
with
right, you're trying to control what somebody else is doing. It has nothing to do with you. It has no impact on you. It has no effect on you.
yeah. Yeah, it's like when people, if you're driving and somebody cuts you off, you get mad at that person. Like, they're, that person's not trying to cut you off. They don't know who
That
you
was not
are.
personal, and odds are they didn't see you. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think the brutal truth that we all have to learn is it's not about me. And
yeah.
that's hard thing to learn,
Oh,
right?
sure.
It is
Oh,
like
sure.
that the world is not about me, that what everybody else is doing is not about me, what they're saying is not about me, that 9 times out of 10, whatever they're doing, they're projecting something about themselves
Mhm.
if they're even involving me. And everyone's on their own little journey.
Yeah. And they're just trying to navigate through life. They've got their own situations. The brain
You're up
often
against
defaults.
neuroscience.
Yeah, exactly. You're up against neuroscience. The negative part, or negative thoughts of our brain, was the first one to get developed when our brains started developing. So we have a tendency just
Running
to
the show.
go, yeah, just going that way, and we have to use the other parts of our brain to go, no, that's actually not true. But you have to kind of pause, and again, that sometimes is in the heat of the moment. We don't feel like that. And I get cut off. It's like, okay, I hope they get to where they're going without hurting themselves or anybody else. Maybe they slept in, maybe they had a
You're
bad
nicer
argument.
than I am. I take a slightly more sarcastic approach to letting it
Oh,
go.
oh, so you basically, so you basically lay on the ska music when they cut you off.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
no, I don't get mad. It's kind of a condescending. So I've, again, from Chicago, so I've had my parking spot stolen as I've tried to back into it. And I actually said this out loud to somebody once. If that's the only thing you have in your life that's making you happy, I don't want to be the one to take that away from you. People don't appreciate. So again, same thing. It's released, but with a
Yep.
slightly more sarcastic, condescending
It's
approach.
a very sarcastic Gen X Chicago approach.
It is.
Yeah,
Hey, if
yeah,
you've
yep,
got to get in front of me in that lane, and that is what your self-esteem hinges on, don't let me take that away
yeah,
from you. If that's all you
exactly.
got, I don't want to take that from
Yeah.
you.
Yep. Oh yeah. And you just let them, stew in their own misery. Yeah.
Exactly.
And you'll be like, you know what? You'll end up finding a spot that is
Oh, yeah.
actually easier to back into.
Exactly.
Yeah, or you've got one of those, cars that does the parking for you,
No,
which
I have a Mini Cooper that fits in a motorcycle parking spot,
that's
so
true.
I
Yeah, yeah,
self-add a
yeah.
different way.
You can probably sneak it in some
I
bike lane
can,
parking too
oh
if you
yeah, I
want.
can
Yeah.
totally parallel park it behind my brother's garage in the south side of Chicago.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. No parking problem for
No
you.
parking problem. So, okay,
Yeah.
so questions for you because we really like, if people aren't picking up on this, we really talked about not trying to control other people,
Yeah.
focusing on the things you can control as ways to help you avoid burnout.
Mhm.
What are some of like my whole thing is, and I mentioned it, like you're up against neuroscience. And in a lot of things, when we're trying to move forward in life, you're kind of up against neuroscience. So you can't change the way your brain works, so to speak.
Right.
To me, the goal is catch it faster, fix it faster. Can I
Yeah.
just catch it a minute faster?
Mhm.
And can I just turn a minute faster? What are some of the other things that you know are triggers or people should look out for or hacks or however you want to phrase that?
Yeah, I'll go with some hacks and we'll kind of blend in some things. Probably the biggest one for me is just making sure that you just focus on your sleep.
Mm.
Really invest in getting good sleep. And that means the best mattress you can afford, the best pillows, the best sheets that feel comfortable to you, room temperature. I use a sleep mask. It's been a game changer. If unless your room is completely dark, then fine. But the sleep mask takes a little getting used to, but just adjust it so it's not like sucking your brain out of your head. It's like that's a little too tight. Loosen it
Right.
up a little
Stays
bit.
on, but doesn't give
Yeah,
you
it's like,
doesn't
it's
cut
like,
off
if when you
circulation.
wear glasses, sometimes you get the little
Yes.
indentation on the nose. All of a sudden you got these lines on the side of your head and easier for me to see because it doesn't mess with my hair doesn't get in the way. So, the sleep mask is a thing, but just focus on your sleep, room temperature. Now, if you sleep with a partner, it's statistically impossible that you will agree on the temperature of the room. So adjust accordingly. It's interesting, especially with those programmable thermostats. Everybody's grabbing their phones at night and adjusting the temperature to their preferred flavor while no one notices. That way you don't have to get out of bed. But I always tell people, keep the smartphones out of the bedroom too, because the light triggers your brain into thinking, hey, it's time to be awake. So it
And it
just does
makes
that.
noise even when it's on silent.
Of course, yeah, exactly. Especially those Amber Alerts, and they're like, "Oh
Right.
man, yeah." It's like, oh, I mean, you should feel bad, someone's, kid's missing, but again, it's like, I'm just trying to sleep, but keep the technology out of your room and really focus on good, consistent sleep. And it's just like anything, you schedule other things, and you say, some people are pretty free flowing, but other people are really, strict on their calendar and their schedule on certain things. Same thing for your sleep. Make sure you're getting that optimum amount of sleep for you. I'm not going to tell you it's 8 hours. You got to figure out that for yourself. But if you focus on that, then what that does is your body then gets to get good sleep and repair the damage we do to ourselves on a daily basis. Because
I don't think people realize, so when I was younger, I used to do competitive powerlifting and bodybuilding, and we used to
Mhm.
use the phrase feed the machine. And I don't think people like eat in order to perform better.
Right.
And I don't think people realize between sleep and hydration, that's what your brain cannot, all the other stuff, right, from the neck down with cardiovascular problems, whatever, but without sleep and hydration, your brain shrivels up and just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah. The our brains change. The gray matter and all that stuff can change just basically on how we're living. And we're not talking about concussions or head trauma or anything like that. We're just based on what we consume. And it's so important. That's another tip is, really figure out what foods are right for you. And that I used a couple of years ago, I got a food intolerance test done, and they
Mhm.
tested me on over 250 types of foods. And a lot of them I knew I had an intolerance to, a bunch of things I did not know. And I was consuming those foods a lot. So I started adjusting my nutritional plan down a bit, and I started feeling better. I had less inflammation. I just was resting better, feeling better. And then occasionally I'll say, you know what, sounds good. I'm gonna have something like that I know that I have an
Right. I know
intolerance
I've
to.
got nothing to do this weekend. It's Friday night. I have 2 days to recover, get my schedule back. I can go eat the thing that's gonna wreck me for a couple of days.
Yeah, and I've done that, but then and this is again, everybody's different on this. It's I'm working and currently, as we speak, I'm currently working on my relationship with food and going, all right, what foods do I know I feel good and nourished after I eat and I don't have any type of side effects to? Even though I know I love the taste of this, it's like it's the taste buds seem to be the boss a lot. And you're like, no, I don't want you to be
Well,
the
and I
boss
think that's
anymore.
habitual
Of
because I know
course.
when I eat clean for a while, when I eat clean for a period of time,
Hmm.
first it starts out with intention, right? I have to pay attention and do the prep work to make sure but after a very short period of time, I completely lose my taste for the foods that are bad for me.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
it's just a different habit gets created.
yeah, exactly. And
It's not, if you can get over the 10-day hump, it's amazing. It
yeah,
becomes
and it gets and healthier too. One of the things I started doing was, making my own breakfast sausage. So the ingredients, I mix it up. I try different things and all of that. And, maybe I'll fry an egg, maybe I won't, put it on a biscuit or homemade whatever and eat it and fine. And then the other day I went to a fast food establishment and ordered a breakfast sandwich, ate it and was lethargic
kills
all
you.
day. I'm
We
like,
used to call them icky biscuits because
yeah,
they tasted so good, but they did such a number on how you felt all day that
yeah.
we used to call them, do you want to go for icky biscuit?
Yeah, well, it makes sense, and it's like at first you go, "Wait a minute, how is this possible?" But it's all about the ingredients. When you're
And I
making your own food, you can
more,
control what you put into it. Yeah.
and I don't think that people are quite, we hear it, but I don't know that, and I absolutely agree with you. So I just put this in a personal perspective. I had a very rough last half of 23. I had issues with my business that I really wasn't expecting. We were doing amazing things and great partnerships and so excited about everything. And then so much of it didn't work. Right. So there's that frustration. I have my mom is very sick and has had a series of surgeries that had a series of complications, and she's halfway across the country. My dad had a second heart attack. He's fine. She's fine. Everybody's fine. But we've got a puggle in this house that has her nights and days mixed up because she is 17 years old. And so we're getting 45-minute blocks of sleep at night. So,
Mm,
and I spent my holiday break doing nothing. And I'm a very hyper, very driven person. And I am telling you, I didn't move for probably 3 weeks. And I read crappy stuff on my Kindle and I watched crappy TV on television and I ate crappy food. It was really good food, but it was very bad for me. And I mean, probably for a good 3 weeks. And the reason I asked you in the beginning, burnout, are we overusing it? Is
mhm.
I would call that a depression, not burnout.
Yeah,
A frustration. I don't feel burnt out. I felt unhappy and stuck and frustrated and all those things, right?
yeah.
So here we are now, a couple weeks into the new year. And
Hmm.
for the last 2 weeks, I have focused on my food, exercise. Like I'm back to taking care of myself physically. I really had to stop and think, okay, what's the one domino? What's the first domino to fall?
Hmm.
Right? What has to be that first domino to fall?
Yeah.
And I could have said, well, I need to be on the phone making sales calls every day, but that's reaction mode, right? I could have come up with a million different things, but when I really looked at it, I was not taking care of myself. And the first domino that had to fall was that.
Yeah.
And it is remarkable to me the difference in just 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't take long. If you start taking care of yourself, it doesn't take long. And as somebody that has both been burned out and suffered with depression, I know there's a lot of commonalities between the two, but the biggest difference for me anyway was that I know I can do it. I just don't want to.
Right.
And
Complete apathy.
yeah,
Complete
you're just,
apathy.
which again is a strong Gen X trait, but being one, I kind of know it, but you have to kind of gauge like, okay, what is this? Yeah.
Right.
And and for me, it was like, okay, there's things definitely not right because there's things that that normally energize me, and I look at it with
And I
no.
didn't feel like doing it right. And to me, it always goes back to the decision. Like my tagline for my business is be in charge, take action, get results. And
Mhm,
because the first thing always has to be that decision.
mhm,
Nothing happens until you make that decision for
mhm,
something to happen. And I did the same thing you did. I'm like, okay, what is this? What is this? How long? And then the next question was, how long was I going to be willing to allow it to continue?
mhm. Yep. And it boils down to the theme where it's ultimately up to you, the individual. You
Which goes
can't,
back to your idea on control.
yeah,
There
and
was
you
nothing
can,
that
yeah,
said I needed something external.
yeah,
It was all right.
it's all within, and you work on yourself to be the best version of you. Then then the dominoes will fall, but they'll be for positive reasons, and you'll get energized, and you'll have the discipline because discipline eats motivation for lunch. The discipline, you get that right when you don't feel like doing something, you're going to do it anyway.
Mhm.
You'll thank yourself for it, and then it usually kickstarts motivation to try something in addition to carry forward. So it's a lot about life hacking, and but more importantly, figuring out who you are. And that's sometimes a very scary question for people to ask themselves. And
And the
for
discipline is so true because Instagram would have you believing it's all everything's just an easy button.
Mhm.
Motivation does kick in, but there's always work first.
Right.
It gets easier, but there's always work first.
Absolutely.
So if people want to continue this conversation with you, I see your book right there, Burnout Proof, which I love
Oh,
in your
oh
background.
yeah.
You're like,
Yeah,
where?
oh, yeah. Mhm.
I don't know what you're actually looking at. But if people want to continue this conversation with you and learn more about how to pull themselves out of this, what
Mhm.
can they do? What can be within their control? What's the best way for them to find you?
Just go to breakfastleadership.com, and there's links at the top where if enjoy that rabbit hole. There's all kinds of things up there. If they want a free PDF copy of my book, just go to breakfastleadership.com/burnout book and drop in your email address. And I promise I won't spam you. And I'll just send you a PDF copy of the book and some other templates and resources that I reference in the book to hopefully help people kind of get back in control of their life and live their best life.
And the thing that I love about this topic is humans get very stuck in all or nothing thinking, but there's a lot of little tiny tweaks you can do that make big differences.
Oh,
This doesn't have to be hard.
no, no, you don't need, for most people, you don't have to reinvent yourself. You just make a couple adjustments here and there, and you'll see huge results. And then from there, you can determine, okay, what other aspects of my life do I want to examine? Don't try to do it all. Just figure out where you're at. And there's a lot to be said about, okay, I feel pretty good right now. Good, good. That's good. Ride that wave,
Ride that
and
way and get that first domino.
yep,
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining me today and sharing your
you're very
story and
welcome.
all your insights. I highly encourage people to reach out. Realizing this has been probably the foundation of what I've been able to accomplish. And I know so many people who this is the starting point of changing everything for them. So it's very near and dear to my heart. So thank you for sharing your insight with me.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Ready Yet podcast. I truly enjoy bringing these stories of success and inspiration to you. Please join us in our mission to empower entrepreneurs to be in charge of their businesses and in charge of their lives by sharing this with anyone you know who would benefit from our tactical and motivating advice, leaving us a review, and letting us know if there are any particular topics you would really appreciate hearing about. See you next time.